The Bible, issues at stake, the unsettling issues nobody talks about. It's the most influential book in human history. A foundation for faith for billions. A cornerstone of Western civilization. But for a text that so many claim to understand absolutely, it is also the source of immense division, confusion, and debate. What if the real struggle with the Bible isn't about believing it or not, but about how we read it? What if the questions we're afraid to ask are the very ones that could lead to a deeper understanding? Today, we're not going to argue for or against the Bible. Instead, we're going to look directly at the issues at stake. The translation choices that change meanings. The historical contexts we forget. The messy process of how this library of books came to be. The stakes. Nothing less than faith, history, morality, and our very understanding of truth itself. Welcome everyone. If you've ever found yourself in a discussion about the Bible, whether in a church, a classroom, or online, you know how quickly it can become polarized. It often feels like there are only two sides, a rigid, literalist view on one end, and a complete dismissal on the other. But there's a vast, complex middle ground that rarely gets attention. This is the space of scholarship, history, and honest questioning. Navigating this space isn't about undermining faith, for many, it's about building a more mature and informed one. The issues at stake we're discussing today aren't minor footnotes. They are fundamental challenges that anyone who engages with this text seriously must grapple with. We're going to break them down into three key areas. 1. The problem of transmission. How did we get the Bible we have today? 2. The problem of interpretation. How do we read it? 3. The problem of application. What does it mean for us now? First, the problem of transmission, the human hands behind the Holy Book. The first and perhaps most daunting issue is transmission. We don't have the original copies of any book of the Bible. What we have are copies of copies of copies, handwritten over centuries. Let's take the New Testament. The Gospels were likely written between 70 to 100 CE, decades after the events they describe. The earliest manuscript fragments we have date from the 2nd century, and the first complete copies are from the 4th century, hundreds of years later. Now, this doesn't mean the text is hopelessly corrupted. In fact, we have more and earlier manuscripts for the New Testament than for any other ancient text. But it does mean there are variations. Scribes made mistakes. They misspelled words. They accidentally skipped lines. Sometimes, they even added small comments or explanations in the margins, which later scribes then copied into the main text. In Mark 1 verse 41, did Jesus feel compassion or anger when healing a leper? Early manuscripts disagree. The story of the woman caught in adultery, John 7:53-8:11. This famous story is absent from the earliest and most reliable Greek manuscripts. Scholars use a field called textual criticism to compare thousands of manuscripts and try to determine the earliest possible reading. This isn't a secret conspiracy, it's the honest work of history. The issue at stake here is inerrancy. If one believes the original manuscripts were divinely inspired and error-free, what do we do when we have to reconstruct those originals from imperfect human copies? It forces a choice: do we place our faith in a perfect, theoretical original, or do we engage with the messy, human reality of the text we actually possess? Then there is the problem of interpretation, the lenses we read through. Let's assume we have a stable text. Now we hit the second, even trickier issue, interpretation. No one reads the Bible in a vacuum. We all bring a set of lenses. Translation as interpretation. Every translation is an interpretation. The Hebrew and Greek languages are dense with meaning that doesn't always have a perfect English equivalent. For instance, in Isaiah 7 verse 14, the Hebrew word alma, young woman of marrying age, and the Greek translation, parthenos, virgin. The translator's choices, based on their theology and understanding, directly shape what the text says to millions of readers. Genre and context. This is perhaps the biggest issue, that we often read the Bible as if it were a single, unified book written in a 21st century historical or scientific style. But it isn't. It's a library. The first chapters of Genesis, for example, share striking similarities with other ancient Near Eastern creation stories. Were the biblical authors writing a scientific report? Or were they using the literary and theological genres of their time to make profound statements about God, humanity, and order versus chaos? Reading it as a modern science textbook creates an immediate conflict. Reading it as ancient theological poetry opens up different, and for many, more meaningful layers of interpretation. Cultural and historical distance. The Bible was written over 2,000 years ago in cultures radically different from our own. Laws about slavery, gender roles, and warfare that we find deeply troubling were often the norm for that time. The issue at stake here is authority. Do we read every verse as a timeless, universal command? Or do we see some parts as reflecting God's interaction with a specific ancient culture, with the timeless principles needing to be discerned through the cultural shell? This is the core of debates over issues like women in leadership or homosexuality. It's not just about what the text says, but about how we decide what it means for us today. This brings us to our final issue, application. How do we move from an ancient, complex text to guidance for our lives, our ethics, and our societies? The Bible has been used to justify both breathtaking love and horrific violence. To champion abolition and to defend slavery. To liberate women and to oppress them. The issue at stake here is hermeneutics, our method of interpretation. Do we proof text, pulling individual verses out of context to support a pre-existing belief? Or do we try to find a canon within the canon, emphasizing what we see as the central, overarching themes, like love, justice, and mercy, and interpreting the more difficult passages in their light? How do we reconcile the image of a loving God in the New Testament with the commanded genocide in the book of Joshua? Different traditions answer this differently. Some see a progressive revelation, where God's character is revealed more fully over time. Others see a consistent God whose actions are justifiable within a specific, harsh historical context. There is no easy answer, but ignoring the question is not an option for a thoughtful reader. So, where does this leave us? It would be dishonest to pretend these issues have simple solutions. They don't. For the atheist, these problems may confirm their skepticism. For the fundamentalist, they may be dismissed as attacks on faith. But for a great many people, scholars, pastors, and everyday believers, these issues aren't deal-breakers. They are invitations. Invitations to a more humble faith. A faith that doesn't fear questions but sees them as part of a lifelong journey. The Bible, when approached with intellectual honesty, ceases to be a simple answer book and becomes a dynamic conversation partner, a complex, challenging, and ultimately more profound source of wisdom. The real issue at stake may not be the Bible's perfection, but our maturity in engaging with it. Can we hold the tension between the divine and the human? Between history and faith? Between a text that is ancient and a spirit that seeks to be timeless? What do you think? How have you navigated these questions in your own life? Whether you're a person of faith, a skeptic, or just curious, I encourage you to continue the conversation respectfully in the comments below. Let's learn from each other. If you found this exploration valuable, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history, religion, and philosophy. I've also put together a list of books and resources for further study, a link is in the description below. Thanks for watching.